Kind of Jessup, you played Taylor Blaine in American Crimes Season 2. It was a real standout performance from that second season. Did you pay much attention at all to the acclaim and the reviews for the show's risky second outing, and also your performance in particular?
I read a few things, just because, when you work on a show for that long, and it really consumes your life for 6 months or so, you're curious to see how people respond to it. I was, because I'd seen the first season had already come out by the time I'd joined the show. The first season got rapturous reviews, so I think there was a little bit of like, are we going to live up to that? Is it going to continue? Or is this going to be the sophomore slump? And it was just, more than anything, me aside, it was just a relief to see that people were on board and that people seem to be enjoying it. And also, because the subject matter is so sensitive, it's, I think, very, very, very scarily easy to accidentally, without meaning to harm conversations or to stumble into areas awkwardly. And so to see that it seemed like we didn't do that was very, very encouraging.
Yeah, John Ridley and Michael McDonald, the production and the network, should be really commended for, shedding light on some issues that we don't normally get to explore.
I hadn't even read a script when I joined the show. I knew broad outlines of the themes they were hoping to tackle, but I didn't know the way they were hoping to tackle them. I didn't know where Taylor fit into it. We really discovered it episode by episode as the scripts came along, not dissimilar to how people watching, the experience of people watching. So didn't have too much time, to be honest, to worry about stuff like that. And when it's in John's hands and John and his writer's hands, you feel this immense relief because when you stay up at night and you think, oh God, how do I fit into a thematic narrative about sexual assault or sexual assault in America or sexuality in America, you start to get sweaty because you can't really do anything. Like, I don't know how I could affect that. So you just hope that if you do your job well, and you just make it real, then other people above you who are thinking much more deeply about it are also doing their jobs. And that's the real relief of having John running the show, is that you knew that whatever you did, there was a rock solid foundation below you. And that's it's an incredible safety net. And it's the best feeling in the world. It's terrifying also, but it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah. The other thing that a lot of people like to talk about, pardon me, about American Crime is that it's filmed in a really unusual way. It stays on actors' faces for more than what we're accustomed to. And speaking with some of your fellow cast members, they all really enjoyed that. The ability to internalize or to portray their characters without really saying much. Did you enjoy that aspect of filming American Crime?
One of the most exciting things to me about the show, before we even started, just having seen the first season, was the formal invention of the show, because it really is unusual, not just for network television or television, but for film and TV in general, which is that it breaks a lot of rules. Normally, I've done other TV, I've done movies, and you have a basic expectation that when you shoot a scene and you cover a scene, it's going to be cut together a certain way. You know that most of the time, unless you're speaking or reacting to something major, you're not going to be on camera. So you, even subconsciously, you curtail what you're doing to fit the space that you know you're going to occupy on screen. And because American Crime follows none of those rules, you can be in a scene for 3 minutes and never be on camera. Or like you said, you can be in a scene for 3 minutes and it's only this. And because you don't know when you're shooting it how it's going to cut together, you can't think about it anymore. So it really is, despite the claustrophobia of it, it really is very liberating. You have to, it's really a show about listening. It's for the characters and for the audience. It's about listening to the way people use language, what they're feeling when they're not speaking, how they're reacting to the system they're going through. And the form of the show, I think, fits that very perfectly. So it's an incredibly exciting way to work. I wish more shows maybe not that specific style because that's very John, but I wish more shows took those sorts of visual risks.
Yeah. What were you told when you first started, and were you given a lot of insight into how the show would unfold?
Nothing. I knew nothing. When I got cast, I had read a few sides for the audition. They were, a few scenes that I don't think actually even made it into the series at all. All of the things, all of the plot points that you would think would be the first, that you would think would be major, I had no idea. I didn't know that Taylor was going into the show. I didn't know that Taylor was gay. I didn't know the circumstances of his sexual assault. I didn't know at all where the plot was going. And it wasn't just me, that was the whole cast. John likes to piece things out because, especially for Taylor, but for all the characters, but most saliently, I think for Taylor, he lives day by day or hour by hour. For most of the season, he's just reacting to things that are coming at him. And he can't think about tomorrow. He can't think about an hour from now, let alone a week from now or deep into the future. So he really is in a state of suspension where the world is just happening around him. And a lot of the show is about that. And I think the experience of making it, not as obviously as intensely, but the experience simulated that in some way or another.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about some of the highlights from season 2 that you had. There was quite a few of them. Obviously, the show really does start to revolve around Taylor and his experience and what he's doing. The first thing I can think of is obviously the gunshot and how that was portrayed. Right. Again, really unusually done, but very effective. Can you take us back to filming that particular scene?
That scene was curious. That was one of the few scenes in the show that the crew didn't really know what we were shooting until we showed up on the day. It was really only me and John and the other actor and a handful of people who had gotten that scene in the script. So there was this real feeling of kind of hushed importance on set, where people knew, because a lot of the crew had been in season 1 and they sort of knew the drill, that this was something important. And that scene is it's a sort of scene you've seen, or you feel like you've seen 1,000 times in movies, where someone gets pushed too far or something snaps, or you know what it's supposed to feel like, what it's supposed to look like, how the people are supposed to react. But the way that they constructed it is you don't even hear the gunshot. There's an immense amount. Most of the scene is built around silence and these long looks. And the way that John thought about it was so piercingly, I can't even find words. It's like, you come at it with certain cliches because you take it from other movies. But John, I remember when we had shot on my side of that, right after the gunshot a few times, he came up to me and he said, after you pull the trigger, when you're looking at him, for a moment, just for a moment, look at him with total empathy. And I don't know if you can read that or if that made it in, but yeah. It shows you where John's coming from in terms of he doesn't want just horror, or he doesn't want just satisfaction, or he wants a gradient of feelings.
Yeah.
And you see that in the show in general, but I think that scene is a really specific microcosm of what John is trying to achieve with the show. So it was, to be honest, I don't have a clear image of that scene in my head because I watched it once like this. But it's a very representative scene, I think, of the show in general.
Yeah. The other one that I love talking about, which I did at length with Lily Taylor, who plays your mum.
Who's my favorite?
Yeah, she was a real standout, and really talked at length with about how she loved working with you, and in particular in the diner. And she opened my eyes to a lot of things about that scene that I didn't really know. Do you want to take us through how that scene played out for when you guys were putting it together?
Well, the scene is at the end of that episode where Taylor shoots another student at the school. His first reaction is to go to where his mom, where she's working at her diner that she is a manager of, and he is in a state of almost dissociated trauma. Like he's sort of out of it, and in one long shot, I think it's like 5 or 6 minutes, she tries to settle him down, phones the police, talks to him. She goes through this whirlwind of emotions as she, as a mother, tries to process A, what has happened, and B, what she's going to do about it, and then finally what it means for them. So it's really this whirlwind of emotion, mostly from her, conducted in this like virtuosic long take. And John had always since he told us about the scene, had always imagined it as that one shot. He planned it out before we got there. So the process really was walking us through the beats of the blocking. So like for this part of the scene, you're here. For this part, you're here. The camera will come here, and then you'll get lost off screen. So it was very technical for a long time. But I've never been so impressed with a crew in my life. Like that is a hard shot to do. And we shot it maybe 6 times. And not one of those times was because of a technical problem or because we had to reset. They were just impeccable. So it really was mostly about rehearsal. And then we didn't shoot it that, like I said, that many times for a shot that complicated. And this is another thing about John, which I think ties in really well, is that like sometimes you see shots like that in TV shows and movies, and they're cool and they're interesting, but it's clear that the focus was on the technical execution. But John never forgot that what the point of that scene was, which is that if this shot as a oneer does not serve the emotion we're trying to convey effectively, then we're not going to do it as oneer. We'll shoot more. There was no dogmatism. His first and only real focus was on the like emotional veracity of the scene, which I think is actually, it sounds simple, but it's super rare.
Yeah, it totally is super rare. But it really, it really worked. And it's a scene that many people talked about after it aired and still are talking about as probably the highlight of the whole season so far, which is saying something for all of you involved.
It's also just a willingness, the end of this shot is just a slow pushing on them sitting in a booth. And it's long, and there's a lot of silence, and there's a lot of them reacting to what's going on in the diner around them, and the TV's playing above them, and the cops arrive, but it's really about them just sitting there together. So it's this willingness, not just technically, but time-wise, because TV is, you have 42 minutes, and you have to choose how you want to spend that. And this willingness to spend 2 minutes of that or 3 minutes of that just on these two people reacting to the space around them and trying to understand what's happening is very rare, because most shows would convey that with two shot counter shots, and it would take 25 seconds, and then you cut to black, and that would be that. So he's expending a lot of capital on that moment, and I think that is also rare.
Absolutely. What's the one thing that you'll take away from your experience on the show, if there's one thing?
Oh my God, I really have no idea. Like there's so many things, because the experience of working with John was unlike anything that I had. Sorry, that's my phone. That Siri just came alive for some reason. She felt the emotion. The experience of working with John was unlike anything I've ever. His dedication, his like supernatural level of focus and care will completely change the way I think about directors and filmmaking, not just in TV, but also working with actors like Lily, who I could talk about for hours, seeing actors like Felicity and Tim and Regina work. It's like and also personally, like that's 6 months, I'm 6 months of my life, that is, I'm university age, like 6 months is a long time for me. And that you change a lot over the course of that, and you learn a lot, and you try things, especially when you're surrounded by people who are so good. You try things and you see them fail, and you see how they fail. So this is a long way of saying that, like, I'm in so many ways a fundamentally different person now than I was going into American Crime. there's a lot of, you know, concrete things like that would bore people, like, oh, I shouldn't do that with my face ever again. Or, you know, watching Lily work, it was just like a wellspring of inspiration, because I think there's a lot of crutches and easy techniques and ticks that you can fall back on as an actor, because like 95% of the time they do the job, and they work, and it's efficient. And you also know, like, you know, like, this is the moment, I'm gonna kill this moment, I'm gonna play this moment. And watching Lily use none of those and refuse to milk a moment and just completely commit to this woman's internal dignity and forward momentum, it was like changed the way I thought about acting. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's completely true. And I like that. Hopefully over the years, I think it's going to take time, that seeps in some deep way.
Yeah. Now, it's early days for season 3, and so you probably haven't heard whether you're involved. A lot of the actors come back, given that it's an anthology. Have you heard anything? And if so, would you be happy to rejoin the cast?
I would be ecstatic. You know, that like I just said, this was a life-changing experience for me, and really was the best time working that I've ever had, and the most fulfilling time working. So I'd be back in a heartbeat. The season 3 got picked up happily last month, but it really is just, from what I understand, they're just getting up on their feet in terms of what sort of story they want to tell. It's a large cast. Season 2 was about schools mainly, so there's a lot of space for younger actors. So if there is space for me, and if they'll have me back, I'll be there in a second. But it'd be really cool. I think one of the things that's most exciting about the show, taken broadly, is that there's this kind of repertory cast of great actors getting to play, at least in season 2, opposite roles. So even in a small capacity, it would be fun to come back and do something completely different.
Absolutely. You know, we're really grateful that ABC put on something like this on network television. It's very rare, and what's beautiful about it is it really worked, and that's testament to cast and crew. Thanks so much for your time, and good luck with the Emmys. We hope that American Crime gets lots of nominations, including for yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.